You never imagine the places you go or the people you meet will change you forever. You may not believe this story, but this encounter transformed my life. I was once the daughter of a ruthless and wealthy man. We never got on well as he considered me an embarrassing tree-hugging activist, but this is the story of something disturbing that happened. I never wanted to come here, but my father insisted. This was supposed to be the crown jewel in his empire. He said it was time to bury the hatchet, to reconcile our differences. What he really wanted was a photo op, a smiling family portrait in front of his latest conquest.
Emma, we finally made it.
Dad, this is wrong. The locals warned you. The forest doesn't want this.
Kid, there are two types of people in this world. Those who make the rules and those who follow them. I make the rules, that's why I make the money. The locals will thank us someday. Jobs, progress, they'll soon come around. Now let me show you what we've accomplished.
You are Mr. Hollis' daughter, aren't you? You are the environmental activist.
Yes, unfortunately, I am his daughter.
You should convince him to leave. The forest doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget.
You mean Kurapira? That's just a myth. I'm afraid the oil companies are going to make too much money to be scared off by a local myth.
He's no myth, Emma. He's the forest guardian. We've seen his signs, the backward footprints, the silence of the animals. Stop your dad before it's too late, please. Your father's celebration, it's an insult.
He won't listen.
Then the forest will make him.
I saw footprints, everybody, but somehow they were backwards.
Jeff, I am afraid you've had too much champagne to drink.
What was that? Can you guys hear that laugh? I turned sharply, but there was nothing there. I looked down and noticed faint impressions in the dirt backward footprints leading toward the clearing. The music began to distort, warping unnaturally. Our guests exchanged uneasy glances as a chilly breeze sweeps through the area.
It's just the wind. Stay calm.
What's happening?
He's here. Kurupira is here.
Hollis, this forest was not yours to take. The locals warned you. Even your daughter warned you, but you listen only to your own greed.
This is my land. I must have had too much to drink. You are not real. You're just a myth.
Emma, you are pure of heart. Take Luce and run now. This is one of the mercies the forest will show you. Run!
I ran with Luce, and we stumbled upon a narrow path lit by fireflies. As we follow it, the sounds of destruction and screaming fade behind us. Kurupira's chilling laughter echoed in the distance.
Ms. Hollis, can you tell us what happened?
The forest, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. I walked away, leaving the reporters stunned. The papers reported the forest fires were the result of excessive partying. They called it the greatest tragedy of recent history. The locals 2 years after still avoid the campsite. Kurupira's spear is still stuck firmly in the ground, marking his territory. What happened that day still sends shivers down my spine. Nature had enough and sent a malevolent entity to avenge it. I can still hear the screams. I can still smell the sickening smell of blood and smoke in the air. I see the forest when I close my eyes. But all you have heard so far is not the story I wanted to tell. So hold on, we are almost there. It has been over 5 years since the tragedy and I sold my father's company. Luce and I have done some real good work with the money, setting up a foundation to help the people of the forest. But there is one multinational company that just won't leave the forest. Recently, I have been feeling really angry. There is a fire within me that I fear will soon be out of control. It is like the forest put someone else inside of me. And that person is waiting to be unleashed on those who harm the forest.
The road leading to St. Peter's Convent was narrow and winding, flanked by gnarled trees that clawed at the sky. My car bumped along the uneven path. The gray clouds above swirling ominously. When the convent finally came into view, I was struck by its grim majesty. The towering stone walls, now crumbling with age, loomed like a monument to forgotten sins. Vines twisted along the structure, and broken stained glass windows glinted faintly in the dim light. I parked near the rusted iron gate, which creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The overgrown grass whispered against my boots, and the wind carried a faint chill. I pulled my camera and recorder from my bag, steeling myself as I stepped toward the entrance. For a moment, I hesitated, glancing back at the road. It was as though the shadows of the trees were stretching toward me, urging me to leave. I was greeted at the entrance by the Reverend Mother and Sister Agnes.
How was your journey, dear?
The Reverend Mother told me that nobody lived in the convent anymore, due to strange occurrences and the dilapidation of the building. She told me that all nuns depart from the premises before sunset, and that all special ceremonies were held in the mornings only. After I stopped my recorder, the Reverend Mother asked me,
Are you a man of faith, my dear? I will be praying for you.
The nuns left keys to the convent on a desk and said they had opened all the doors. Sister Agnes looked pale and frightened. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust coated every surface, and the faint echoes of my footsteps seemed to stretch on endlessly. The walls were lined with faded tapestries, scenes of saints and martyrs, their faces twisted and distorted by time. A shattered crucifix lay on the ground, its wooden frame splintered. I took slow, deliberate steps, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. A sense of unease settled over me. The silence wasn't empty. It felt alive. I reached the main hall, where long wooden pews stretched out like forgotten sentinels. As I approached the altar, my heart skipped a beat. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure kneeling in prayer, but the shadows swallowed it before I could focus. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft, rhythmic tapping. I followed it to a side corridor where a single candle flickered in an iron sconce. The tapping grew louder as I approached a locked door at the end of the hallway. When I pressed my ear against it, a voice whispered, "Turn back." The door suddenly rattled violently and I stumbled back, my heart racing. I reached the chapel, where a beam of faint light illuminated the altar. The air grew colder as I approached. My eyes were drawn to the loose stone near the altar, a corner jutting slightly upward. As I crouched to investigate, a sudden chill swept through me, and I heard a faint whisper. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Turning slowly, I saw her, the black nun. She stood at the far end of the chapel, her tattered habit billowing unnaturally. Her face was shrouded in shadow, but her glowing red eyes burned into me. I stumbled back, barely managing to hold my flashlight steady. When I blinked, she was gone. Shaken but determined, I pried the loose stone free. Beneath it lay a shallow grave. The bones were wrapped in decayed black fabric, and beside them lay a tarnished crucifix. Scratched into the stone above the grave were the words, "Forgive me." My hands trembled as I reached for my recorder, trying to document the find. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned sharply, but the chapel was empty. The air felt heavier now, and a low hum resonated through the walls. Gathering my courage, I took the crucifix and hurried out of the chapel. In one of the convent's abandoned rooms, I found a small leather-bound diary tucked beneath a pile of debris. The pages were fragile, filled with anguished confessions. The nun wrote of her affair with a visiting nobleman, her guilt consuming her. She described the day the other nuns discovered her secret, the betrayal, the punishment. The final entry ended abruptly.
They are coming for me, God forgive them.
Deeper in the convent, I stumbled upon a hidden door. Beyond it lay a small, suffocating room. At its center was an altar carved from blackened stone. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to writhe in the flickering light. A blood-stained crucifix leaned against the altar, and the air smelled of iron and ash. As I stepped closer, I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. The walls seemed to breathe, and the shadows writhed like living things. I placed the crucifix from the grave on the altar, and the room erupted with sound. A guttural chant echoed around me, growing louder and louder. The black nun appeared before the altar, her skeletal hands reaching out. Her face shifted between human and monstrous, her hollow eyes burning with fury. Her voice boomed in my mind, accusing me, condemning me for disturbing her rest. I held up the crucifix from the grave, shouting the words from the diary. God, forgive them! The nun's scream pierced the air and the walls began to tremble. Shadows erupted from the corners of the room, swirling violently as she lunged toward me. I bolted from the room, the walls of the convent groaning as if alive. The shadows pursued me, clawing at my legs and arms. I burst through the front doors, collapsing onto the overgrown grass outside. When I looked back, the convent seemed to shudder before falling silent. Back home, I reviewed my recordings. In the final moments, a faint whisper emerged.
Thank you.
But as I turned off the recorder, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, the black nun standing just behind me.
Some sins refuse to be buried.
This is why you should never take in a stray cat. You never know what's hiding beneath that fur. One stormy night, a couple found a drenched, meowing kitten on their doorstep. They took it in, fed it, loved it. But as the nights passed, strange things happened. Shadows moved, whispers echoed. The cat's eyes glowed red in the dark. One night they heard a voice not their own. Get out. Turns out not all strays are lost. Some are never meant to be found.
Sean's invitation. When I first saw the ad, it felt like fate. My hands trembled as I read the headline, Sean Moreno, legendary producer, seeks fresh new talent. I dreamed of an opportunity like this for years. To have a record company finally want to sign me was what I had dreamt of since I was a little girl. The invitation to his mansion for a weekend of mentorship was more than I could have hoped for. The drive to the mansion was uneventful at first, but as I got closer, the road narrowed, swallowed by gnarled trees. The GPS lost signal halfway there, leaving me to navigate winding paths bathed in an eerie mist. By the time I pulled into the circular driveway, the sight of exotic cars parked outside gave me a strange sense of unease, a stark contrast to the mansion's ominous silhouette. Sean himself greeted me at the massive double doors. He was charming and confident, his amber eyes locking onto mine with unsettling intensity. Welcome, Emma. His handshake was firm, his hands cool and smooth. He led me inside, where a sweeping staircase and glittering chandeliers welcomed me. It was opulent, luxurious beyond anything I'd imagined, but something about it felt wrong. As Sean showed me to my room, a tall, gaunt man appeared silently beside us. His icy blue eyes seemed to pierce straight through me. "This is Mr. Alaric, my butler," Sean said. "He'll make sure you're comfortable." Mr. Alaric inclined his head ever so slightly, but his gaze didn't waver. Something about his presence made my stomach churn. In the dining room later that evening, I met the other guests, 4 other young musicians, all as starstruck as I was. But as the conversation flowed, I noticed how strange they were. Their voices were hollow, and they rarely made eye contact. They didn't even touch their food, which looked unnaturally perfect, like something out of a painting. One of them whispered to me, "Have you noticed? The mirrors don't show everything." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but before I could ask her what she meant, Sean stood, drawing everyone's attention back to him. The next night, Sean brought me to his recording studio. My eyes caught as I entered. A grand piano sat in the center of the room, surrounded by shelves of books and strange artifacts. "Go ahead," Sean said. "Let me hear that voice." I sang. At first I was nervous, but soon something took over me, and I lost myself in the music. When I finished, Sean stood still, his face unreadable. "Your voice is extraordinary." I blushed, unsure how to respond. "We're going to make some real magic, Emma," he said. That night, I woke to faint music echoing through the halls. At first, I thought someone was playing the piano, but the melody was wrong, discordant, eerie. I followed the sound to a locked door. From the other side, I heard whispers, my name. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run.
When I turned back, I thought I saw a shadow move at the end of the hall, but it was gone when I blinked. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream, but Clara's words about the mirrors lingered in my mind. That afternoon, I tested it, standing before the large mirror in my room. At first, my reflection seemed normal, but as I leaned closer, I saw it. My reflection moved out of sync, lingering just a second longer than I did. I stumbled back, my heart racing. On the second evening, Sean presented me with a gown, burgundy silk with gold accents. It was beautiful, but as I slipped it on, I felt trapped, like I was wearing someone else's skin. At dinner, the other guests seemed even stranger, their movements stiff, their expressions blank. When I looked at Sean, his gaze felt predatory. "I'm not feeling well." "Excuse me," I said. Disoriented and confused, I called my Nana, told her the whole story and how I felt sick. Nana reassured me that I was just having cold feet and that I would be all right. Then she asked me, what was that name again? What she said next sent shivers down my spine. She said, "Honey, Sean Moreno and Alaric Green, his deputy CEO, died in a fire at a mansion over 50 years ago." I felt chills run down my spine and goosebumps all over me, and then my phone glitched out and the previously full battery was now dead. As I wandered the halls, I saw Mr. Alaric disappear through a hidden door behind a bookshelf. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed. The passage led to an underground chamber. Candles flickered, illuminating grotesque carvings and paintings on the wall. I lost all sense of time and reality. My sister, who had been dead for 10 years, appeared in a painting and screamed, "Emma, what are you doing here?" "Oh no, they're gonna trap your soul as well." At this point, I could no longer tell what was real or what was in my head. I found myself coming to my senses on a cold table. I looked up and saw Sean. In the center of the room, he stood before an altar, wearing a hooded robe, the medallion around his neck glowing faintly. The other guests had formed a circle. They were all dressed in hoods as well. One of the musicians lay unconscious, in a pentagram circle on the floor, with candles at the 5 points. I hoped they didn't notice I was awake, so I quickly tried to escape. In a panic, I knocked over a vase, which fell to the floor and broke, alerting everyone. Sean shouted, "There is nothing to fear, let me explain everything," his voice calm and steady. His success, his fame, it all came at a price. The medallion was the key to an ancient ritual that allowed him to steal the voices and souls of young artists, trapping them forever within the mansion. In exchange, the musicians would be allowed to have 2 years of fame and fortune. "You'll be part of something eternal, Emma," Sean said. "You will be part of a powerful club, and you can get out anytime you want by offering 7 souls for yours." I nodded, pretending to accept, but inside I was terrified and panicking. I had to escape. I was up next for an initiation into the occult. That night, I scoured the mansion desperately for answers. In the studio, I found an ancient book detailing the ritual. The medallion was the source of Sean's power. Destroying it would free the trapped souls. But as I read, I felt something cold brush against my neck. I turned and saw my reflection in the studio window, staring back at me, smiling even though I wasn't. I am not a religious person, but right then I said a prayer. "Whoever is listening up there, please let me make it out of this." Alaric led me to the circle. During the ritual, as Sean chanted in a language I couldn't understand, I lunged for the medallion. He was faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist with inhuman strength. Mr. Alaric appeared, his face twisted into a sneer. But as Sean focused on restraining me, I managed to grab the medallion. The eye in the middle of the medallion immediately came to life and looked at me. In a rush of adrenaline, I threw it and it smashed against the altar. The room shook violently. Sean's face looked contorted, like there were 1,000 beings within him. He dropped to his knees, and his real form manifested. Sean let out an ear-piercing scream as the medallion shattered. The walls of the mansion began to bleed, the trapped souls wailing as they were released. I ran, dodging collapsing beams and flames as the mansion fell apart. The forest outside seemed alive, clawing at me as I sprinted toward the driveway. Behind me, the mansion crumbled into ash. The next morning, I returned with the police, but the mansion was gone. Only a charred patch of earth remained. Among the ashes, I found a shard of the medallion still faintly glowing. As I picked it up, I heard a whisper.
"Emma, Emma, don't worry, you belong to us. We will get you next time.
That's when it dawned on me. Sometimes the price we pay for fame and fortune is too much.
You know what people don't realize about the woods at night? It's not always just the wind rustling the leaves. Picture this. Me, Alex, and Jordan, around a campfire laughing, roasting marshmallows. Jordan hears something, but I say, "Relax, it's just the wind." Then a branch snaps. Our puppy Max growls, staring into the darkness. Alex whispers, "Maybe we should check it out." Jordan, nervous, replies, "Are you insane? This is how horror movies start." One by one, we investigate. Each time, Max watches silently. Suddenly, it's just me by the dying fire, pale and shaken. I don't know what happened to Alex and Jordan, but Max stayed with me. He kept me safe. Or did he? Now, as I sit at home by the fireplace, Max's eyes glow red. His jaw stretches unnaturally wide. Not everything loyal is safe. Be careful who you trust.
The Haunting of Pine Hollow Motel. A lonely highway in the dead of night. No lights, no houses, just a stretch of road swallowed by darkness. For a man like Jordan, a long-haul traveller used to chasing deadlines and defying exhaustion, this was the perfect setting for something unforgettable.
Great, a flat tire, just my luck. I see a motel up ahead. I'll check in for the night.
Jordan steps into the small parking lot of the Pine Hollow Motel. The building is a relic of the 1950s, its paint peeling in long strips. The wood siding is warped and ivy snakes along the walls. A single porch light casts warped shadows on the cracked concrete. The parking lot is empty, save for a rusted station wagon parked at an angle. The windshield is coated in dust, obscuring the inside. Jordan glances at it briefly, but focuses on the building. The neon vacancy sign buzzes intermittently, casting an eerie green and red glow that flickers against the fog. Jordan hesitates at the entrance, peering through the glass door. The reception area is dimly lit by a single yellowish bulb. Jordan steps inside. The air is stale, thick with the smell of mildew and dust. The walls are lined with old sepia-tone photographs of smiling families, their faces unnaturally stiff. A wooden counter stands at the back, cluttered with a dusty bell, an old rotary phone and a guest ledger. A faint hum of static comes from a radio perched on a nearby shelf, its dial glowing faintly. Jordan taps the bell. The sound echoes unnaturally, as if amplified by the empty room. A door behind the counter creaks open and an older man, mid-60s, shuffles out. He's unnervingly pale, his skin stretched taut over high cheekbones. His smile is too wide and his eyes, grey and watery, seem to track Jordan's every move. The manager hands Jordan a rusted key labelled Room 3. Jordan walks down a narrow hallway, the walls lined with the same sepia-tone photographs. The floorboards are old and creaky with reddish stains. Room 3 is at the end of the hall. Inside, the room is small and outdated with floral wallpaper curling at the edges. The bedspread is faded and patched, and the single overhead light sways slightly, casting uneven shadows. Jordan tosses his bag on the bed and sits down. He exhales, rubbing his temples. But something catches his eye, deep scratches along the baseboards as if something clawed at the walls. A faint whisper echoes from the vent above. Jordan freezes, listening intently. He grabs his flashlight and shines it into the vent. Two bloodshot eyes stare back at him.
What the hell?
The flashlight drops and the light flickers. The whispering grows louder, now interspersed with guttural growls. Footsteps echo faintly outside his door. Jordan scrambles to lock it. The doorknob rattles violently. Shadows gather under the gap beneath the door, shifting unnaturally. Jordan grabs the bedside lamp, his breathing ragged. The rattling stops, replaced by silence. Jordan slowly opens the door. The hallway is empty, but the photographs lining the walls have changed. One now shows him standing at the motel reception desk.
This isn't real.
The lights flicker. From the corner of the hallway, the motel manager appears, his face distorted and grinning impossibly wide. His limbs stretch unnaturally as he steps forward. Jordan stumbles back into the room and tries to climb out the window. It won't budge. The walls begin to bleed, the blood seeping into the carpet. In a frantic frenzy, Jordan smashes the window with the lamp and climbs out, cutting his hands on the glass. He runs through the parking lot, glancing back to see the motel dissolving into darkness. The neon sign flickers once before vanishing completely. On the highway, he flags down a passing car. The driver, a woman in her 50s, looks at him with concern.
You okay? You're bleeding.
The motel, back there. Pine Hollow.
What motel? There's nothing here for miles.
The next morning, Jordan returns with a tow truck driver. The motel is gone, replaced by an overgrown clearing. Among the rubble, Jordan spots a rusted key labelled Room 3. As he picks it up, faint whispers rise on the wind. Some places were never meant to be visited.
Some doors should never be opened. I remember the first time I stumbled upon this deserted carnival. The rusty rides creaked in the wind, and an eerie silence filled the air. As I walked through the dark carnival, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, I saw it, the Laugh with Jester Jack booth. And there he was, Jester Jack waving from behind the counter. Honk honk. Step right up, watch Jester Jack make you laugh. I couldn't resist the eerie allure of the carnival booth. As I approached, Jester Jack's juggling seemed almost unnatural. I watched in horror as Jester Jack's smile twitched unnaturally. His eyes seemed to follow me, piercing through the darkness. Then his head tilted and I heard the sickening crack of his neck. His smile stretched wider, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. Don't go yet. The fun's just beginning. Roar! Roar! Snarl! I could feel my heart pounding as I watched the carnival booth's flickering lights. Suddenly, Jester Jack's face began to transform before my eyes. He roared at the camera, a monstrous sound that sent chills down my spine. Then, he lunged forward and I knew I was in danger. The POV of his violent attack was terrifying. I couldn't look away from the extreme close-up of his monstrous eyes. The rapid montage of distorted carnival imagery was overwhelming. Finally, the screen went black and the unsettling audio left me in a state of dread. I remember the night I first stumbled upon this abandoned carnival booth. The air was thick with an eerie silence. As I stepped inside, the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. The interior was ominous, filled with shadows that danced in the corners. Then I saw it, a shadowy figure lurking in the back. My heart raced as I realized I was not alone. I turned to face the figure, and there it was, my own reflection, twisted and menacing. My face, but not quite mine. My eyes began to change, morphing into something monstrous. I could feel the transformation taking over. The pain was excruciating as my body contorted and shifted. I was becoming something else, something terrifying. I looked at my new form, a monstrous version of myself. The power was intoxicating, but the horror was undeniable. You won't be laughing now.